Hey guys, welcome to another one of my videos. Today we will be looking into the software Houdini by Side Effect. If you're just here for the tutorial and you don't really care about the intro, I will put a little timestamp in the description. You can just go ahead and click on there. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk for a little bit. This is my first Houdini tutorial. I've been learning Houdini for a little more than a year now, and I kind of want to take my knowledge of the program to the next level, and the best way that I learn is by teaching. So we're just going to start off this tutorial with the understanding that you know nothing about this software, and if you already know some of it, you might be a little too advanced for this first video. At least I'm hoping that we can kind of build off of this first video into maybe a little more advanced things as we go along. So this is Houdini. You can download the program for free on sideeffects.com. They have a couple different licenses. There's Apprentice, which is the free one, the non-commercial edition, and that's the one I use, obviously. And the only downsides to this one is whenever you render a video, you'll always have a little watermark that says Houdini in the bottom right corner, and you can't export Alembic files, and those are what you use to like transfer this project into a different program like Unity or Unreal. To do that, you'll need at least the indie version. This is your viewport, and it's basically where you can see the actual simulations and geometry going on. This is where your network view is, and that's where you can drop down your nodes that are going to affect what happens in the viewport. And then up here is going to be some parameters for each of your nodes, and you'll kind of see as we go along. So today we're going to make just a coin. We're not going to be doing any crazy dynamic simulations, not going to be setting anything on fire yet. But I thought it would be fun just to make a simple coin and then indent it with a design. So a little bit of camera controls here in the viewport. If you left click, you're going to rotate the camera around the scene. If you middle click, you're going to pan around, and then right click, and then you move the mouse left or right, you're going to zoom in and out, just so you can kind of navigate around the viewport. So first thing I always do whenever I start a new project is I actually make a new project, and you're going to do that up here on File and go down to New Project. Here is where you're going to choose your project path. Let's just go to YouTube and make the file. I'll call it like coin tutorial. You can call it whatever you want. And this is going to make a folder. In that folder, I usually just hit delete and it'll all just show up in the first initial folder, but you can also name that. Say if you are going to export this to Premiere or After Effects or something like that to do a little more work on it, it might be nifty to have Houdini as its own folder in this project. Just hit accept. And then I'm also going to save it, and you'll see that it's already in our folder that we made with our project path. We'll just also call this a coin tutorial. All right, now that we have our project made and our file is saved, we can go ahead and start. So in this network view, I'm gonna hit tab and type in geo. Hit enter and left click. And geometry nodes are basically everything that you see in the view scene. You can kind of think of these as folders where if you double click in it, you're going to go into the folder, and that's where you're going to drop down your surface operators or SOP nodes. To get out of it, you can click this object tab right here, or you can also hit U and that'll go up. So we're going to name this geometry folder. You can click on this and just like a regular folder, and let's just call it coin just to keep track of it. We're going to dive in there and hit tab again, and we're going to type circle. Enter, drop it here in our geometry node. So we have our circle, this is our SOP, and these are parameters for this circle. So let's change a couple things. Obviously, a coin wouldn't stand on its end here, and it would not be 2D. So we will fix all that as we go along. So for orientation, let's change it to ZX plane so it's laying flat on the floor. And for your primitive type, you can change it to polygon, NURBS curve, Bezier curve. What I find gives me the least amount of trouble is either primitive or polygon. We're gonna go with polygon. So that opened up a divisions tab, and as you see, each one opens up another division until it gets smoother and smoother and smoother. Okay, so we're going to set this to, let's say 300 divisions. So it's just this nice smooth circle. Archetype close, everything else looks good. You can obviously make it bigger if you want. You can change the orientation of it up, and we'll just leave it simple for now. One right there on the ground. All right, so we have our circle, but as you can see, it's flat and doesn't look like a coin, and it doesn't have any of the designs imprinted on it that we want. So we're going to hit tab, and we're going to add a poly extrude SOP. So we're going to type in poly extrude right there. You can just left click it, and here. Now you have to wire these in. So you're going to left click here, drag geometry for operation, and let go right there. It didn't do anything because this blue tab right here on our SOP is our display. So we're going to have to display this poly extrude right here. And it's still not doing anything because up here our parameters are all 0. So we're going to raise the distance just a little bit, like right there. You can kind of play around with it, just how thick you want your coin to be. And you can see that right now it kind of just looks like a petri dish. So we're going to scroll down and hit output back. And that's looking a lot more like a coin to me, but we need ridges around the edges still. If you can kind of picture like a penny in your mind, it sinks in a little bit in the center. So to make the indents, we're going to have to poly extrude inwards on both of these sides. Obviously, the ridges, the ends, they're fine, but we want just these two. So what we're going to do to select those is we're going to hit this select button, hold down here, and the default is primitive, so that's fine. Left click on this one, shift left click on this one. That's how you select multiple primitives. And on the viewport, you can also drop down SOPs. So we're going to hit tab, poly extrude, and you can see that when we do it this way, it automatically wires it in for us. So that's pretty nice. And you can see as we drop the SOP, our group is targeted 0 to 1, and that's our primitive number. If you click right here on display primitive numbers, we have our 0 and our 1, and those are the ones that we selected. We could also, to get away from the selecting on the viewport, we could hit tab, poly extrude, wire that in, hit the display. We could type in 0 to 1. And that would also do the exact same thing. So when you lower the distance, we don't get the thicker ridge that we want. So we're going to have to inset it just a little bit. Inset it, you can see the edge come in, and you can adjust this, what you think a regular penny would look like. And if we inset it, you're gonna see that it's coming in at an angle. It's not a straight, like a right angle. Okay, so we're going to have to poly extrude it again. But as you can see, our primitives have changed. Since we did that first poly extrude, we got more primitives, and now it's 300 and 301. And you can type that in on the next poly extrude in this group tab, or I just find it's easier just to select these. So left click, shift left click, tab, poly extrude, and automatically does that for us, which is nice. We're gonna lower the distance there. And we're starting to get that nice coin shape. Obviously, coins have a design on the surfaces, so let's make that next. We're going to hop back up here. Remember, you can click Object, or you can also type in U. We're going to drop down another geometry tab, another geometry node. We're going to just call this reference. Dive into there. Let's make it grid this time. Tab, type in grid, click on that, and we have our grid. Let's just lower this below our coin and change the camera perspective. So up here, you'll see this persp. Left click that, set view, and you can do a top view port. And here we can see our top camera. You can also, little hotkey, you can hit space and B, and that'll give you a couple different options, and you can change the view on every one, and just set it how you want to. I'm gonna stay with this one right here. Stay with this one right here, our top view. And you can't see it, our coin right now, because it's ghosted right now, and they're both gray, but our coin is right there. So let's set our grid to 2 rows and 2 columns, and our size, a little hotkey. You can hit the middle mouse button on any of these and just kind of scroll, and that'll change the number on the parameter. And you can do it by 0.1 or 1 or 10. Let's revert that and revert that. And you can also do it on everything in this parameter. So for size, if I middle mouse click and scroll down, that's going to decrease the size on the X and the Y. So we'll make it about the size of our coin. Let's just make sure that it is below. It's not. Here you'll have these little handles. You can move down the Z axis, or you can just slide it down here. Okay, so we have our grid underneath our coin. Now we're going to need a reference image. At the time of this recording, looks like we are about 2 hours away from St. Patrick's Day, so I'm going to make a lucky coin. So I'm going to just pull up an image of a clover. Alright, so I saved an image of a clover, and I just put it in the project folder called Geo that Houdini made for us when we made a new project. So once you have your image, it doesn't have to be a clover, and it's okay if it's watermarked or whatever. We're just using it for reference to make our indent on our coin. Going to hit tab, and we're going to drop down a UV quick shade SOP. Wire that in, display that. And you can see that we have a UV shade on our grid. Right now, the texture map is just UV grid gray. We're going to change that to our image that we have. And we have our image here. Click on it and hit select. And now we have our image for reference underneath our coin. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger here because I'd like it to take up most of the coin. You can now clearly see the coin a lot better, so you can kind of get a frame of reference. You can also change, if you want it a little over to the side, you can just adjust the grid how you like it. Alright, now we're going to follow the path of our reference and make a shape. And we're going to drop down a curve. Quick note, you are going to want the display flag to still be on the quick shade, because if you do it on the curve, we lose the image because it's displaying on the curve, not the quick shade. But if you still have the curve selected, it's still working. Now I'm just going to follow along the clover here and click and follow along, just left clicking. Obviously, the more points you have, the smoother your image will look. And when you reach back to the end of your image, you're going to get this little hook right here. clearly they're connected, just hit enter and you have your image. Now, if you don't believe me, we can change the perspective and you can see our little geometry that we made right above our coin. So when you hit the display flag, you'll see we have our clover now. And we're going to drop down our friendly sop, the poly extrude. And we're just going to make this a little bit thicker. And depending on how thick you have it is how deep the indent on the coin will be. So let's do it like there. Let's just output the back. And now we are going to drop down a null sop. And a null sop is it basically doesn't do anything. It's kind of like a reference null or a bookmark null. When you want to use what you have here in this geometry node and do something else with it, it's probably a good idea to drop down nulls whenever you can. And we can kind of mark this. We can hit C and do like a little color here, just so it points out. We can click on it, kind of like a folder, and rename it. Let's just name this like out clover. And typically it's a good idea to name your nulls in all caps and starting with out, and that way it'll be easy to spot when you're trying to find this null for other purposes. So we're going to hop out of this object. We're going to go back into our coin geo. So how do we bring this clover into our coin geo? Well, we're going to drop down an object, merge, and this is going to bring in our other geometry. So here in the object, click this, go to our reference, and you'll see if it's capitalized, it'll be up there at the top. Out clover. Now when you put the display flag, we have our clover in our coin geometry node. So I want to indent this with this. To do that, we're going to drop down a Boolean. And a Boolean has a bunch of different options for two geometries to interact. So we'll do our coin into geometry A and our clover into geometry B. And we're going to subtract A from B. As you can see, the clover is resting on top of the coin. It's not interacting with the coin at all because the two geometries are not colliding. So we're going to have to bring this clover down just a little bit. To do that, we're going to drop down a transform sop, and that just moves the orientation of the geometry. And we're just going to click and drag this right into this wire. And now we can transform this. So you can move it down by the Y. And you can see that the clover is actually cutting into the coin. It's subtracting away from it. You can move the Y, depending on how deep you want it to be. Maybe like there. As you can see, the other clover is ghosted right now, and it's kind of bugging me, so I'm gonna hop out and unclick this display flag here. Now, we can't see it. I want it just a little bit deeper. Cool. It's starting to look like a coin. Now, of course, you can always do more. We can add like a little background. So let's just drop down this geo. Let's call it background. Just drop down a grid. Lower it. Front. Just make it right there. And now you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't really look like a coin. Let's add some color. To do that, you can apply a shader or a color node. Just for simplicity's sake right now, let's just drop down a color. Sop, color, write that in, the display flag, And there's a couple different parameters here. You can do some kind of cool things, but we'll just click on this color here. Make it like a... well, obviously you can make it any color that you want. Let's just make it like an orange, like a lucky coin for our background. Let's drop down another color. Put that in. Let's make that like a... something a little dark to show off the coin. Have our coin. You can also do other things here too. You can drop in a camera, lights, all that. So you know what? Let's do that. So let's drop down a camera. Right now, we technically don't have a camera for rendering. Right now, it's just the default perspective. You can see right here, no camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a camera right now where the viewport is. To do that, I'm going to hold Control and left click. And now I have my camera. You can see that it dropped down a little camera node right here. You can adjust the view right here or right here, either way. Kind of rotate it. Let's have it facing down. If you try to tumble or move away from here, you'll see our camera right here, and we moved away from it. If you want to stay on your camera, you're going to click right here, go to your camera, hit this little padlock right here, and now when I move, the camera moves with it. Great, so we have our camera. Maybe we want to add a little light. So we'll add a little point light. Oh, these right up here, by the way, are called shelf tools. And they're just kind of little preset defaults that Houdini makes for us. We could also, to do all this, we could type in tab right here, and we could type in camera, and that would drop what camera. We could also type in light, and we have a bunch of different light options. It's just kind of habit for me to use the shelf tools, especially for simple things like lights and cameras, but either way, it does the same thing. We have our light. And let's drop down a couple more lights here. And I'm just kind of quickly going over this stuff here. We can go more into depth on setting up a scene later. I was just kind of showing off some of the basics of Houdini. And so now we want to see a rendered view. Let's just get a little preview. To do that, up here, you can click on render view, click on your camera, and hit render. It's going to generate the scene for us. And there you have your very first geometry you made in Houdini. And you might be thinking, well, it doesn't look really shiny and doesn't look impressive, and it's not animating or anything, it's just kind of sitting there. For future videos, I think it'll be fun. We can kind of do some cool things with this coin. Maybe we can like set it on fire, and maybe we could turn it into a puddle of goo. I mean, that's just the crazy thing about Houdini, is that whatever you want to do, it's pretty much endless. The only thing holding you back is your knowledge of the software. We're pretty much just scratching the basics for now, but as I said earlier, hopefully we can build on what we learned today, and hopefully we can make some pretty cool things. So thanks for watching. Bye.